The school nurse called to confirm whether he would be picking my daughter up early, as authorized. My name wasn't listed first on the contact sheet anymore. I was standing in my office when she said it, phone pressed to my ear, calendar open in front of me. I told her there had to be a mistake. She said she was looking at the form right now. It had been updated. She asked if I wanted to make changes, but said she'd need approval from the primary contact. I didn't argue with her. I asked who that was. She said his name. 2 months earlier he'd come into my life through my kitchen, not through me. A mutual friend had sent him over to fix a leak under the sink while I was at work. I came home to a dry cabinet, replaced pipes, and a note on the counter explaining what he'd done and what still needed monitoring. He'd labeled the shutoff valve with a piece of tape. Clean handwriting. Precise. I texted the number our friend had left. Thanked him. Asked what I owed. He said nothing. Said it was minor. Said he lived nearby if anything else came up. Things did. He showed up when the washing machine flooded on a Sunday morning. When my car battery died at pickup. When I realized I'd double-booked a conference call and a parent meeting and needed someone to stand in line for me. He didn't frame it as help. He framed it as availability. He was younger, calm, moved through my house like someone who noticed systems instead of objects, put things back where they belonged, asked where permission lived before assuming it. The first night he stayed over was because my daughter had a fever and I hadn't slept in 2 days. He took the couch, woke me when it was time for medication, left before school. After that, he became part of the routine, not as a replacement, as reinforcement. He learned the schedules, the shortcuts, the names of teachers and neighbors. When I traveled for work, he stayed behind and kept things running. Sent updates, photos of homework done, dinner plated, shoes lined up by the door. It felt stabilizing. When the school sent out new emergency contact forms mid-year, he offered to fill them out to save me time. He'd already done his own background check for volunteer clearance. He said he could drop them off on his way back from the hardware store. I signed where he marked. He never rushed me. He never needed to. The nurse waited on the line while I processed what she'd said. I told her I'd call back. I hung up and searched my inbox for the form. Found it. Opened the attachment. His name was first. Under primary guardian. My signature was at the bottom. I didn't remember changing the order. I didn't remember discussing it. My phone buzzed with a message from him. A photo of my daughter at the kitchen table coloring. Caption: fever's down. She asked if she could stay home tomorrow. I typed back yes. Then I sat there, staring at the contact sheet on my screen, trying to remember when access had turned into position. After that call, nothing changed on the surface. He still came by in the mornings. Still packed lunches the way my daughter liked. Apple slices separate so they didn't touch the sandwich. Still left sticky notes on the counter when he took her to school, letting me know which teacher he'd spoken to, whether there were forms in the backpack. I didn't tell him about the nurse's call. There wasn't a place for it yet. Everything he was doing still made sense. He handled the parts of my life that ran on deadlines. School pickups when meetings ran long. Permission slips. Payments for aftercare. When I traveled for 2 days, he stayed, sent me pictures at night. Her asleep. The kitchen clean. The dog walked. The closeness came from continuity, from nothing falling apart. One evening, I came home late and found him on the floor with her, building something out of cardboard and tape, a school project I'd forgotten about. He'd already emailed the teacher to ask clarifying questions, printed examples. Let her choose. He looked up at me and said it was almost done. I nodded and went to shower. Later, after she was asleep, he told me the school was updating their emergency protocols again. New system. New portal. He said he could take care of it. He already had access from volunteering. He said it would save me time. I told him where the login was. That was how things expanded. Not in decisions. In defaults. He became the one who answered emails first. The one who knew the schedule without checking. When a field trip required a same-day payment, he covered it and told me later. When I tried to send him money back, he said it wasn't urgent. We'd balance it out. There were moments I registered without naming. Teachers addressing him first at pickup. Other parents assuming he was her father. He didn't correct them. I didn't either. Felt simpler. The first time I felt something tighten was small. I tried to pick her up early one afternoon and the front office asked me to wait. Said they needed to confirm something. Made a call. Came back and apologized. Said it was just a system lag. Everything was fine. He laughed when I mentioned it that night. Said schools were a mess administratively. Said that was why he'd volunteered to be the point person. So things wouldn't slip. He never said instead of you. He didn't have to. We started sleeping together regularly. Not in a rush. Not every night. He kept his place. He left early when I had court calls. He made space. It felt respectful. One night I watched him help her with reading homework. Patient. Focused. No phone in his hand. When she stumbled, he waited. Didn't fill in the word. Let her find it. After she went to bed, I thanked him for being so steady. He said we were a team. The paperwork came later. A thin packet from the school district. Updated contact authorization. Emergency permissions. Release forms for off-campus activities. He'd already filled them out. Highlighted where I needed to sign. I skimmed. Recognized most of it. Signed. He took the folder with him the next morning. Said he'd drop it off after pickup. That afternoon, I received a confirmation email from the school portal. Contacts updated. Access granted. His email was listed first. I noticed it, then closed the message. There was a meeting starting. There always was. That evening, he texted to say dinner would be late. He had to stop by the school to talk through something with the counselor. Nothing serious. Just alignment. I told him okay. When I got home, my daughter was already asleep. Her backpack by the door. Papers neatly sorted. On top was a new laminated card. Emergency contact information. Printed. Clean. His name at the top. I put it back in the bag without saying anything. Still felt like care. The shift didn't come with a conversation. It arrived as a request framed like maintenance. The school district rolled out a new centralized system mid-semester. He mentioned it over dinner while clearing plates. Said it consolidated everything: attendance, medical notes, permissions, emergency response. Said the old forms wouldn't carry over. Someone had to re-enter data or access would lapse. He said he could handle it. I asked what he needed. He said just my confirmation. He'd already populated the fields. He turned the laptop toward me and pointed to a checkbox that said reviewed. He didn't scroll. He didn't explain. He didn't hover. I clicked. After that, things stopped coming to me entirely. The nurse didn't call again. The front office stopped flagging me at pickup. Emails from teachers shifted tone, like I was copied out of courtesy rather than responsibility. When I replied directly, responses were polite but delayed. When he replied, they came back fast. I noticed it first when my daughter came home with a new schedule for aftercare that I hadn't approved. He said it was temporary, just for this week. He'd adjusted it to cover a late meeting I had. He said it made sense. I agreed. The midpoint didn't feel like a threshold. Felt like delegation. A week later, a form came home in her backpack. Authorization for off-campus activities. Field trips. Emergency medical decisions. He'd already filled it out. Not to replace me. To streamline. That was the word he used. He highlighted the signature line and left the folder on the counter while I made coffee. I signed without sitting down. That afternoon, the school portal sent an automated confirmation. Permissions updated. Primary decision maker confirmed. I clicked through out of habit. The language was clean. Neutral. My name appeared under secondary contact. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then I closed the tab. He picked her up that day. Sent me a photo from the playground. She was smiling. Backpack off. Shoes dusty. Caption said she'd had a good day. When I got home, he was already cooking. He asked how my meetings went. I told him fine. He told me the counselor wanted to schedule a check-in. Just to align. He'd take it. I let him. There were small gaps I didn't fill. A note from the nurse about allergies I hadn't updated. A teacher conference scheduled without asking my availability. When I mentioned it, he said he'd loop me in next time. He said the system was still adjusting. I believed him. The night after the counselor meeting, he said everything was good. Said they liked the consistency. said it helped my daughter to know who to go to first. He didn't say who that was. He didn't need to. I realized then that I hadn't been to the school in weeks. The midpoint crystallized the next morning. I tried to log into the school portal from my phone. My password didn't work. I reset it. The reset email never came. I asked him about it that night. He said he'd updated access roles. He said it was part of the new system. He said it didn't remove me, just reordered things so there was a clear lead. He said clarity was important in emergencies. He said we could revisit it later. Later didn't arrive. What arrived instead was efficiency. Silence. Things working without me touching them. I told myself that was stability. I told myself that was care. I didn't tell myself anything else. The consequences didn't announce themselves as loss. They arrived as courtesy. The school counselor emailed to confirm a follow-up meeting. The message was addressed to him. I was included after the greeting, my name tucked beneath his. The time was already set. During my workday, I replied that I'd need to reschedule. The counselor apologized and said she'd check with him. I didn't hear back. At pickup that afternoon, the office asked me to wait again. Not long. Just long enough for someone to glance at a screen and smile politely. They handed my daughter over with the practiced calm reserved for non-issues. Nothing was said out loud. On the walk home, my daughter asked why he hadn't come. I told her he was busy. She nodded and skipped ahead, unconcerned. At home, I opened the school portal from my laptop. Still no access. I tried from a different browser. Same result. I searched my inbox for notifications I might have missed. Found none addressed to me directly. Everything was either forwarded or copied. That evening, he came by later than usual. Brought groceries. Cooked. Talked about his day. He mentioned the counselor meeting in passing. Said they discussed routines. Transitions. Stability. He said it went well. I asked why I hadn't been included. He said they'd needed a decision-maker present. He said he hadn't thought it would matter. He said we could review notes if I wanted. He didn't show me any. The next morning, a permission slip appeared on the counter. Field trip. Out of state. 2 days. He'd already signed his portion. My line was blank. Highlighted. I hesitated. Asked questions. Where they were going. Who would supervise. He answered easily. He'd already spoken to the teacher. He said it was a good opportunity. He said my daughter was excited. She was standing behind him, backpack on, shoes half-tied, listening. I signed. That afternoon, an automated message arrived. Consent received. Primary contact confirmed. Travel clearance approved. The language had shifted again. Not drastically. Just enough. He started keeping her overnight more often when I had early calls. Said it made mornings easier. Said she slept better there. He sent photos of breakfast, of her brushing her teeth, hair still tangled. The house felt quieter when they weren't there. Cleaner. Less disrupted. One night I realized I didn't know where her inhaler was. I checked the cabinet. Not there. Checked her backpack. Not there. I texted him. He replied that he'd moved it to his place. Said it made sense to keep medical things where she slept most often. I didn't respond right away. Later that week, the school nurse emailed about an updated health plan. Addressed to him. I was copied. She asked for confirmation. He replied within minutes. Attached documentation. Signed. I watched the thread update in real time. When I tried to intervene, my reply landed after his. The nurse thanked us both and said everything was set. The word settled heavier than it should have. That weekend, I suggested we all spend the day together. Park. Lunch. Something normal. He said he already had plans with her. A museum. Tickets booked. He said we could do something another time. I watched them leave. Backpack on her shoulders. His hand steady at her back. They didn't look back. That night, I found a school envelope in the recycling. Addressed to him. Inside was a notice about upcoming re-enrollment. Deadlines. Next year. I realized I hadn't seen anything about it. When I asked him, he said he was handling it. He said it was already in progress. I stopped asking him questions that had answers I couldn't use. The re-enrollment deadline passed without anything landing in my inbox. I told myself it was because he'd handled it. That was the pattern now. Things were handled. Things moved forward. Nothing broke. What broke was position. Teachers stopped making eye contact with me at pickup. Not out of rudeness. Out of calibration. They checked their screens, then smiled, then deferred. When I volunteered to chaperone a class event, the coordinator thanked me and said they'd need to confirm with him. She said it lightly, like a habit. I went home and searched my email for the re-enrollment confirmation. Found nothing. I searched the trash. Spam. Old threads. The only thing there was a forwarded receipt from him weeks earlier. Enrollment submitted. Deposit paid. Program selected. My name appeared once. Under additional contact. I didn't confront him that night. I waited until the weekend, when my daughter was at a sleepover. We sat at the kitchen table with coffee between us. Neutral ground. I asked when we were going to talk about next year. He said we already had. I asked when. He said when it came up. He said we'd agreed stability mattered more than logistics. He said he'd chosen the program that aligned best with her needs. He said I'd been exhausted at the time. He wasn't wrong. I asked why my name wasn't primary anymore. He said the system required one lead. He said it reduced confusion. He said it didn't mean anything emotionally. He said paperwork didn't define relationships. I asked if I could be added back. He said we could look at it later. Later didn't arrive. What arrived instead was a notice from the district, addressed to him, copied to me, schedule finalized, transportation arranged, emergency protocols confirmed. I replied directly and asked to be listed as primary. The reply came from him before the district answered. He said not to complicate things. He said this wasn't the hill to die on. He said my daughter was thriving. He said the school trusted him. That was when I understood the shape of it. He wasn't blocking me. He was outpacing me. I went to the school in person the next day. Asked to speak to the administrator. She met me with a practice comm and pulled up the record. She showed me the screen without turning it fully. Primary guardian him. Secondary me. She said changes were possible, but they required consent from the primary. Or a formal review. She said those took time. She asked if there was a concern about safety. I said no. She nodded. That ended the conversation. That evening my daughter didn't come home. There was no emergency. No panic. Just a message from him saying she was staying over. Museum ran late. She fell asleep in the car. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I realized then that I didn't know where her backpack was, or her inhaler, or the folder with her drawings she never forgot. I realized I didn't know which house she would call home if someone asked her. I texted back that I wanted her home in the morning. He replied that mornings were hectic. He'd bring her to school. I said I wanted her home tonight. He didn't respond. I drove to his place. The lights were on. The car was there. I rang the bell. No answer. I called. Straight to voicemail. I stood there long enough for the porch light to turn off automatically. On the way back to my house, my phone buzzed. A message from the school portal. Automated. Pickup authorization updated. Primary contact confirmed. I pulled over and opened it. There was a checkbox next to my name now. Unchecked. The police officer didn't ask me to sit down. He asked me to explain why I was there. I said my daughter hadn't come home. He asked when I'd last seen her. I said yesterday morning. He asked who she was with. I said his name. He asked if there was a custody agreement. I said no. He asked who the primary guardian was listed as with the school. I didn't answer right away. He waited. I told him what the portal said. I told him what the school had told me. I told him I'd signed forms. I told him I hadn't thought they meant this. He nodded once and wrote something down. Said this didn't look like an abduction. Said it looked like a domestic arrangement. Said it would need to be handled through family court. He gave me a card and told me who to call in the morning. I drove home alone. The house was exactly as I'd left it. Her shoes by the door. The jacket she'd grown out of still hanging on the hook because I hadn't gotten rid of it yet. Her room untouched. Bed made the way I did it, not the way he did. I sat on the floor and waited for a message that didn't come. In the morning, the school called to say she wouldn't be attending. He'd notified them. Said she was transitioning to a different routine. Temporary. They just wanted to make sure I was aware. I said I wasn't. They apologized and said they'd noted my concern. I called my attorney. She asked the same questions the officer had. She asked to see the forms. I emailed what I had. She went quiet for a moment and then said we'd file, but that it wouldn't be immediate. She said the school documentation mattered. She said the consistency mattered. She said this wouldn't be fast. I asked where my daughter was sleeping. She said we'd request disclosure. That afternoon I received an email from him. One paragraph. Calm. Precise. He said this wasn't meant to hurt me. He said our daughter needed stability and he was providing it. He said involving the police wasn't productive. He said communication should go through counsel moving forward. There was no signature. I went to the school the next day and asked to see her counselor. The front desk told me she wasn't available. They said my daughter was doing well. They said changes were hard but kids adapted. They said they'd keep me informed. They didn't let me into the classroom. That evening, a photo appeared on his social media. My daughter on a swing. Smiling. Caption with her name and a heart. Comments congratulating him on being such a devoted parent. I didn't comment. The next message from my attorney said the initial hearing was scheduled for weeks out. Temporary orders favored maintaining current arrangements. She said we'd argue then. Weeks passed. Updates came through channels I didn't control. Report cards. Health notices. Field trip photos. All forwarded. Never addressed. I learned about things after they'd happened. The first time my daughter called me, it was from his phone. He stood close enough that I could hear his breathing. She told me about her day. Asked when she'd see me. I said soon. He ended the call before I finished the sentence. I stopped leaving the porch light on. The house learned the sound of only my footsteps. When the court order finally arrived, it was thin. Temporary. Measured. Visitation scheduled. Supervised at first. Review in 3 months. I folded it and put it in the drawer where I used to keep permission slips. The last update from the school portal came the same day. Primary contact unchanged. Secondary contact acknowledged. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet that followed, knowing exactly how much space had been taken and how little of it I could reach.